All right, ready for a deep dive?
Always.
Today we're tackling a book that might just shift your whole perspective on history. The Promised Day is Come.
Oh, interesting choice.
It was written way back in 1941 by Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Bahá'í Faith. But trust me, this isn't just some dusty old relic.
I'm intrigued already.
We've got excerpts straight from the book and some really sharp, scholarly analysis to unpack. I think you'll be surprised by how relevant it feels, even now.
Well, let's jump in then. What's the angle for our deep dive today?
The thing that really gets me about this book is the timing. It was written right smack in the middle of World War II.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? The world holding its breath, not knowing if civilization, as they knew it, would even survive.
Oh, absolutely. It was one of the most turbulent periods in human history. A world on the brink, for sure.
It's hard to even fathom that level of global uncertainty, you know? And on top of that, the Baha'i Faith itself was still relatively young, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Still finding its footing, so to speak.
Trying to figure out its place in a world that felt like it was falling apart.
Right. And Shoghi Effendi, as the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, was guiding a community grappling with its own identity, all while trying to make sense of this worldwide upheaval.
So, the Promised Day Has Come isn't just some abstract philosophy, is it?
Not at all. It's a message born from the crucible of a world in crisis.
That context definitely adds a whole other dimension to the title, The Promised Day Has Come. It just sounds so weighty, like a turning point.
Well, it does, doesn't it?
So let's get to the heart of it. What exactly does that phrase, the promised day, refer to in the Baha'i Faith? And why might it have struck such a chord back in 1941?
The Promised Day signals the beginning of the Baha'i era, which actually started in the mid-1800s. The whole premise of the book is that this isn't just another date in history, but the dawning of a new cycle in the spiritual and social evolution of humanity. And it's all tied to prophecies from various religious traditions, the Bible, Islamic texts, and of course, Baha'i scripture.
You can definitely see why a message about a new era of peace and unity would resonate during a world war. It's like a light in the darkness.
Absolutely. People were yearning for hope.
But the idea of distinct eras in history, it makes me wonder, how did Shoghi Effendi actually differentiate the Baha'i era from everything that came before it? What sets it apart?
He argues that the Baha'i era marks a shift towards a more mature understanding of humanity and our place in the world. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness and the oneness of humanity.
So it's not just some fluffy feel-good concept.
No, he gets really practical. Like, he dives into the need for a global system of governance, something that goes beyond national borders. And get this, he emphasizes the equality of women and men. Pretty radical for the early 20th century, right?
Oh, absolutely radical for that time. It sounds like he was calling for a total restructuring of society as we knew it. But ideals are one thing. Actually putting them into practice is a whole other story. Did he expect the Baha'i community to just sit around and wait for this new world to magically appear?
Not a chance. He saw the Baha'i community as a kind of microcosm of the future world he envisioned. They were tasked with actually living out these principles, unity, justice, equality in their everyday lives.
So it's not about passively waiting for utopia, but actively working towards it.
Exactly. In fact, he laid out concrete actions the community could take to help build this new world order. Things like focusing on education, social and economic development, and actively pushing for racial unity.
Okay, so rolling up their sleeves and getting to work. Which makes me think about the whole Baha'i emphasis on service. Was that a key part of his message in The Promised Day Has Come?
Absolutely central. He didn't see service as some optional side project, but as the core of faith in action. He even argued that engaging in acts of service, no matter how small, contributes to the progress of civilization itself.
He saw a connection between individual acts of service and the advancement of civilization. That's pretty profound.
It is, isn't it? And for him, it was about more than just alleviating suffering. It was about building connections between people, fostering understanding and unity in a world that was so divided.
A message that still resonates today, I'd say.
Totally. And it wasn't limited to just the Baha'i community. He believed that anyone, regardless of their beliefs, could contribute to building a more just and peaceful world.
I'm starting to see how this book, even though it's decades old, speaks to these core challenges we're still grappling with today, The need for unity, for justice, for a sense of shared purpose. But I do have a question about something. The title, The Promised Day Has Come, it obviously points to the idea of prophecy. What role does prophecy actually play in Shoghi Effendi's vision of the Baha'i era?
That's a great question. The book is really interwoven with prophecies from all sorts of sources, and understanding how he uses them is key to grasping the depth of his message. Shoghi Effendi didn't use prophecy in a deterministic way, like predicting specific events. It was more about highlighting the major trends and principles shaping history. He saw the Bahá'í Faith as the culmination of divine revelation unfolding over thousands of years. Each messenger, each prophet, they're all adding a piece to this huge puzzle of humanity's spiritual journey.
So less about predicting the future like a fortune teller,
Yeah.
and more about recognizing patterns, understanding the forces that are shaping the world.
Exactly. And he used historical events and scriptural interpretations to back up his ideas. For example, think about the time leading up to the Baha'i Faith's founding in the mid-1800s. Super intense social and political upheaval. He saw parallels in the Book of Daniel, those prophecies about a time of the end, filled with conflict and transformation.
Interesting. And that time period also lines up with prophecies in Islam about the coming of a new manifestation of God, right?
Right. It's like he's weaving together this incredible tapestry of different religious traditions.
I can see how that would be compelling. But what specifically about the Baha'i Faith's message or teachings makes it the defining force for this new era? What sets it apart from those earlier religious dispensations?
One of the core principles that sets the Baha'i Faith apart is the concept of progressive revelation. It's the idea that God's guidance for humanity unfolds gradually throughout history. Each messenger builds upon the teachings of the ones who came before.
So it's not about replacing or rejecting earlier religions, more like building on them, adding to the conversation.
Exactly. The Baha'i teachings recognize all the major world religions as valid, seeing them as stages in humanity's spiritual evolution. Imagine a spiral staircase. Each religion represents a level, and with each turn, humanity ascends to a greater understanding. But the Baha'i Faith brings new teachings specifically for this current age.
Give me an example. What would be a new teaching from the Baha'i Faith?
Well, take the emphasis on the oneness of humanity. It's more than just tolerance, more than accepting different cultures or beliefs. It's about recognizing the fundamental interconnectedness of all people, regardless of race, religion, nationality, or any other label.
And that call for unity would have been pretty revolutionary in the early 20th century, with all its divisions and conflicts.
Oh, for sure. Especially in a time when those divisions were so stark, often leading to violence.
It's a powerful message, but even today, putting that concept into practice can feel really challenging. I mean, talking about unity is one thing, but how do we bridge those divides in a world that often feels so polarized?
Right. That's the real challenge, isn't it? And Shoghi Effendi doesn't pretend it's easy. He emphasizes that building unity requires a fundamental shift in our thinking, a shift away from seeing ourselves as separate individuals or groups and embracing our shared humanity.
So less about preaching unity and more about taking concrete action to break down those barriers.
Exactly. He talks about the need to eliminate prejudices, to foster understanding, and to actively work towards a more just and equitable world.
And he specifically called on the Baha'i community to lead by example.
Absolutely. He saw them as a model for this world he envisioned, a world where unity and cooperation weren't just ideals, but were actually lived realities. He urged them to engage in social action, work for the betterment of their communities, and promote education as a tool for empowerment and social change.
All very practical steps.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something you mentioned earlier, Shoghi Effendi's vision for a new world order. What did that look like? Did he get into specifics?
Oh, yeah. He laid out some pretty bold principles, things like a world federation, a universal auxiliary language, an international court of justice, and getting rid of extremes of wealth and poverty, creating a more just and equitable society, basically.
Those are some ambitious goals. It's easy to be cynical to think that'll never happen. But part of me is drawn to that hopefulness, to the idea that a better world is possible. What would you say to someone who dismisses all of this as just idealistic dreaming?
Well, look at how much the world has changed just since 1941. We've seen the rise of international institutions, a growing awareness of our global interconnectedness, and a bigger focus on human rights. These are all trends Shoghi Effendi pointed to. We haven't achieved utopia, not yet, but there's definitely progress happening.
There's room for optimism.
Always. We just have to choose to see it. And that's a key takeaway from The Promised Day Has Come. It's not doom and gloom, it's a roadmap to a better future.
I like that. It's a reminder that history isn't just a bunch of facts and dates. It's a way to understand the forces that shape our present and can guide us toward a better future. But speaking of history, I'm curious how Shoghi Effendi addressed the issue of suffering and evil, especially with the backdrop of World War II. If this new era is supposed to be about peace and unity, how do we reconcile that with all the pain and conflict in the world?
That's a deep question, and Shoghi Effendi tackles it head-on in the book. He acknowledges the reality of suffering, both individual and collective, but he offers a perspective that goes beyond just blaming human nature or chalking it up to random chance. He uses this analogy of childbirth. The mother goes through intense pain, right? But it's in the process of bringing new life into the world.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
So he's saying humanity is going through a similar thing. All this upheaval, all this suffering, it's like birth pangs.
We're transitioning to a new stage of consciousness, and it's not exactly painless.
Exactly. Like, we're collectively giving birth to a new world, a world based on a deeper understanding of our interconnectedness.
And our responsibility to create a just and peaceful world.
Right.
I can see how that perspective would be comforting in the face of so much suffering, especially during a time like World War II.
Yeah.
But it also makes me wonder about our own role in all of this. If this transformation is happening anyway, do we just sit back and wait for it to play out? Or do we actually have a say in how things unfold?
He's very clear that we're not passive bystanders in this process. He links it back to the idea of free will. Humanity has this incredible capacity for both good and evil, and the choices we make, individually and collectively, those are the things that determine the course of history. We're not just along for the ride, we're active participants.
So the Baha'i Faith might offer a vision of a better future, but it's not a guarantee, right? It hinges on our actions. It's like we're co-creating this promised day with every choice we make.
That's a great way to put it. It's not something that just happens to us. It's something we're actively shaping.
That's pretty empowering. A little daunting, but definitely empowering. It reminds me that even when things feel chaotic and uncertain, we still have the power to influence our collective destiny.
Absolutely. And that's really the heart of the promised day has come. It doesn't sugarcoat the challenges, but it offers this profound message of hope and agency.
I love that. So we've covered a lot of ground today. The historical context, the promised day itself, what makes the Baha'i era unique, the role of the Baha'i community, and this whole fascinating interplay between prophecy and history. Before we wrap up, though, I want to bring it back to our listeners. If Shoghi Effendi's right, and the Baha'i era is a new chapter for humanity, one defined by unity, justice, and that recognition of our interconnectedness, where do you see those values showing up in the world today? What gives you hope?
It's a great question to reflect on. Honestly, even with all the negativity in the news, there are signs of hope everywhere.
Where do you see them?
Well, look at the movements for social justice gaining momentum all over the world. The increasing awareness of climate change and our responsibility to care for the environment, and the efforts to bridge divides between cultures and religions through dialogue. Those are all positive signs.
Like those seeds of unity and justice are already planted.
Exactly. And we see it in everyday acts of kindness, too. A stranger helping someone in need, a community rallying around those who are struggling. These are all glimpses of that promised day shining through.
So it's not just about waiting for some utopian future to arrive. It's about recognizing and nurturing those seeds that are already here.
Yes, the promised day isn't some far-off event. It's happening right now. Each act of kindness, each step towards justice, each effort to build bridges instead of walls, all of it contributes to bringing it about. It's a collective effort.
What a powerful thought to end on. The power to create a better world rests within each of us. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive into The Promised Day Has Come. It's been a journey through history, prophecy, and the potential of the human spirit. We encourage you to check out the book for yourself. See what resonates with you. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep building that better world, one thought, one action at a time.